today I want to share a little bit about this topic of purification, which often has, you could say, unconscious connotations, because there's the whole puritanical movement, people unclean, unclean, like an obsession with purification. Disorders like anorexia are sort of a obsession with purification. Lots of different ways that purification gone overboard is really destructive. And at the same time, toxins are real, emotional stagnation is real. There's a lot of things that do need to be purified from our system, and it can be really easy to imagine that it's us that is being purified, that it's not our nervous system, or if it's not our body, or if it's not our physical components. We can imagine that I am unclean and I need to be purified, which of course is wildly inaccurate, right? Because the pure, perfect innocence of the soul is what the purification process is actually revealing. So I'll just lay down a quick perspective so you understand where I'm coming from on this. Basically, every illness, nearly every illness, every physical chronic situation outside of, physical trauma. If you fall off your bike, this doesn't really apply to you. But the vast majority of chronic illness all comes down to emotional stagnation. Different ways that we have stopped our emotions from flowing properly, and so it creates sort of a festering, right? Even an emotional wound can fester, just like a physical wound. And it festers by not feeling, by not experiencing, by not moving this energy, which seems like it's not physical energy. But at the same time, we can physically feel it, and you can physically see effects of it. So it's debatable whether you could consider it physical or non-physical. But that's besides the point. The real point is that there's a bit of a dichotomy between purification of this emotional stagnation and perfectionism. Because if I am insistent about this purification to the degree that I'm a perfectionist, it's actually damaging, destructive, addictive, and it doesn't even work. So it depends from which perspective we approach the purification process. And what is it we're actually purifying? We are learning to grieve our belief structures. Belief structures are thoughts which are constantly moving. They're addictive thoughts. They are also known as ego structure, also known as, in some definitions, personality structures, although it's not the true personality. It's all inherited personality. It's wounded structures. A belief is just a thought that you keep on thinking. So with all these belief structures, one built on top of the other, built on top of the other, built on top of the other, it's a big energy suck. And this is why people get sick. They are unconsciously invested in epic layers of belief structures unnecessarily, and this emotional investment means that most people have very little energy left for themselves, because all of this unconscious loyalty to our ancestral lineage of belief structures that would cause us to feel guilty if we were to release them. So we hold on and keep honoring these fictional ideas in an attempt to somehow gain the approval of our parents, even if they're no longer present, or whoever our primary caregivers are. It may be grandparents, it may even be a sibling. We absorb these loyalties, we create these loyalties, we decide these loyalties, we use our masculine energy to anchor in these loyalties between the ages of 0 or even younger than 0, while we're still in the womb, and 5 years old. And then by anchoring in these belief structures, we have these energies that we identify with, and so the purification process is purging all of these identifications, all of these structures. And so what is that called? That is called grieving. So we are grieving the loss of a incorrect, inaccurate identity. And so it hurts, because it's just like if you lose your toy, or it's just like if you lose your best friend, or it's just like if you lose, dessert, and you're not allowed to have dessert before you go to bed. So everything in the awakening, healing process comes down to grieving. The most external layer of our emotional body is fear. Under that is anger, and under that is sadness. So it doesn't really matter where we start, but it's always necessary to eventually get down to the sadness, because we have to be grieving the loss of the identity. And so sometimes we're going to feel tears come up, or we're going to be crying or even wailing, and not really understand why. Because our mind isn't designed to understand the grieving of itself. Does that make sense? The mind has a really hard time being able to comprehend the usefulness of, you could say, random crying or random expressions of grief and energetic movement, because it's a body intelligence experience which is purging that structure. Amber asks, how does one cycle through this process without feeling lost? It's a great question. So the issue is, part of us is tracking, right? And part of us is releasing. So it's like the masculine measuring stick and the feminine surrender happening at the same time. So the best way I have come to experience this process is by using music as a facilitator, unless we have a human facilitator to sit with us. Or in some cases, plant medicines are great facilitators too, because they provide an additional presence that we can surrender to. Sometimes I'll even do mirror work so I can see myself, or sometimes even recording myself on a camera like this gives me an additional method of oversight so that I can have something, some presence to surrender to. So, music, for example, I like to listen to African drums, or depending on what's being purged, it even could be heavy metal, or it could be calming, like, I like calming Balinese music, even though I'm in Netherlands now, but I'll go back to Bali later. And having some kind of music to create parameters or create a space for you to surrender to really helps to create a finite container through which to purge a belief system. So our masculine aspect can say, okay, from this time to this time, I'm going to be moving this energy. One of my favorite processes is called inner dance. Check it out if you don't know it. Actually, there's a bunch of inner dance music which you could download. I think it's shamanicdj. What's that website? It's not SoundCloud. What's the other one? Bandcamp. So shamanicdj.bandcamp.com, and that's a bunch of inner dance music that is great to listen to because it oscillates between calming and agitating. So the agitating part helps you to purge something, and then the calming part lets you sit with it, and so it's like a musical facilitator for an experience. So if you set yourself like a start and an end time for an intentional journey, it gives you a greater degree of self-trust so that you're not always processing at unexpected times and you're like going through it all the time. It's so much easier if you like intend it. From here to here, I'm going to fully surrender. I'm going to cry everything I need to cry out. And grief is like glue. Grief is the glue that holds together our belief structures internally in our body. That's why I'm doing this. The belief structures live within our nervous systems. They are like energetic thought forms. So I'm kind of illustrating the space. They actually take up physical space, and they're physically shaped. If you had spiritual vision, you'd be able to see the hooks thought forms have, and they grab on your emotional body. So when we're grieving, we're dissolving the armor that the hooks are grabbed on to. And then when that armor is dissolved, the hooks must let go, and then the thought forms float away and dissolve. And this is the liberation. This is liberating ourselves from our ancestral addictive trauma, because we no longer need to identify with this thought form keeping us safe, because we learn to feel safe with the pain instead. And when we feel safe with the pain, it can no longer torment us. It can no longer cause us to suffer. I'm going to say this a different way, because it's really important to understand what surrender really looks like and feels like. So, when I'm in a relationship with a woman, it's my job as the representative of the masculine in a lot of the cases, maybe 70% of the time, because I have about 70% masculine energy. And if the woman is representing the feminine in a certain scenario, which most of the relationships I'm in, the woman represents the feminine about 70% of the time, there is a role that I am playing, which is allow her to express herself and to be and feel whatever she needs to feel with no judgment, no hurrying, no agenda, no pushing, for as long as she needs to. And here's what's really interesting, is in my mind, I'll say, okay, I'm going to set aside probably about an hour for this experience. And out of my mouth, I'll say, take as long as you need to. We don't need to hurry at all. Just settle in, feel what you need to feel. There's no hurry. So in my mind, I'm curating the experience with the masculine energy. And out of my mouth, I have a very soft container so that there's no agenda being felt by my partner. And this also applies to clients and stuff like that too. But the real key here is that if she can feel, and when I say she, this could be a client or a partner, but it could also be, the heart is what is being purified. The heart is what is releasing these belief structures. And so if I was a perfectionist about this process, I would say, okay, you have 1 hour, feel your shit, let's go, right? And that perfectionism creates an agenda. And when you have a conscious agenda, meaning when the agenda is present in thought as part of the experience, it makes it really difficult to surrender to that. Right? It's like if someone says, okay, cry real quick, we need to go. It's not going to be likely that we're going to be able to tap in and feel safe, because the perfectionism is too loud of a priority in that moment. Does that make sense? So I'll tell the person who is having the experience, take as long as you want, cry as much as you need to, be as loud as you need to, go as slowly as you need to. And by creating that softness of container, it actually causes the experience to happen faster and more efficiently and more effortlessly, because the surrender is possible. If I'm putting limits on the experience, then there's going to be some kind of fight. There's going to be something to fight. But if there are no limits on the experience, then there is nothing to fight, and only surrender is possible. So can you see the kind of logical conflict here? It's like, by setting boundaries, I have less clear boundaries in this instance. By putting hard boundaries around the feminine, it can create, the agenda can create unsafety. But by allowing the feminine to expand and feel and be in chaos, and have the agenda be automatic to her perspective, it creates real safety, and she can just trust that I'll handle whatever logistic stuff needs to be handled, whatever mind stuff needs to be handled, so that the feminine can expand into feeling with no thought, no identification. And this is the nature of purging. This is the nature of changing paradigms. This is the nature of releasing our wounded childhood self. And so it's very healthy to cry productively. It's very healthy to experience ourselves very deeply, and it's definitely recommended to do it in an intentional way, so that it's not I'm just reading the comments here too. We want to have a clean experience. A lot of times we don't get that exactly. Life is messy. That's okay. But if we can organize our experience to some degree, we can have times for an energetic upgrade, and we can have times to put that upgrade to use. And sometimes they overlap and we can't always control it, but with love and without perfectionism, to the degree that we can organize our times for upgrade, then we'll have a much more clear mind to put that upgrade energy into use during our regular life, you could say. Yeah, so Amber's asking about limits and boundaries. Yeah, people will tend to rebel. Anger will tend to come up when there's some kind of hard boundary on an experience. So let's say, for example, I'm feeling emotional, I have to go to work in 30 minutes, and there is a real boundary, right? So what can I do? I can put on a music track which lasts, let's say, 25 minutes, and then I can instruct myself, you have as much time as you need, don't worry about the clock, don't worry about the pressure, all of that stuff is just totally irrelevant. This is for you now, this is all about you, this is all about your process. Dive into it, full blast, fully commit to it. And it's that commitment to the upgrade process, or it's that commitment, full commitment to the purging process, that allows us to actually move the energy. And how can we fully commit if the agenda is telling us you have to move faster, you have to go, you have to get this done, right? So it's in the commitment that we're able to surrender. So we always have some masculine energy and some feminine energy. You can't get rid of one, right? So it has to go somewhere. So for the feminine to surrender, the masculine has to make the commitment. I am going to fully surrender right now. And that is the magic of the unfolding that needs to happen in order to create the alchemical transformation. So, and that's a good word too, alchemy, is what's happening here, right? I can get into this in another video, but there's the elements, fire, water, air, earth, ether. In Chinese medicine, there's wood. And so I've actually found that the stages of grief correspond to these elements in a really beautiful way. And if we can intentionally call upon the energies of each of these elements, it can very profoundly help us move through the stages of grief and unlock higher consciousness from within our somatic experience, from within our somatic structures, the thought structures that I explained earlier. So, yeah, I think that's about it for this video. A lot of information, but kind of the same topic. I went from a few angles. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any more questions. Looking forward to making more videos soon. I'll post this on my YouTube also, and you can check out my library there. So all my videos are in one place. And it's also on my website, quantum.theater. Theater spelled the American way. T-E-R at the end. And thank you for watching. Let me know if you would like another video on another topic. I like sharing. I like offering videos based on requests. So let me know. Many blessings. This is Joshua Falcongray. Thank you, Amber, for your shares. And heading out. Okay, bye-bye.